There are 35 people on death row in South Carolina. This is part 1 of the series. Fred Singleton, 40 years on death row. Elizabeth C. Lominick, 73 years old, was essayed by Singleton after he broke into her house, killed her, and stole her belongings. The widow's body was discovered strangled with a bed sheet in the bedroom of her Newberry County home on September 9, 1982, by two sisters and a niece. Singleton had roughly $100 belonging to the victim in his pockets when he was apprehended in Georgetown County, along with gold and diamond jewelry. The victim's vehicle was also located. Singleton's fingerprints were discovered on the car and the screen of Mrs. Lominick's bathroom window. James William Wilson, 34 years on death row. He killed 2 children and wounded 9 other people during an elementary school shooting spree. Wilson, who was 20 years old at the time, was the gunman in the 1988 Oakland elementary school shooting. Wilson acknowledged bringing a loaded gun into the school. Tequila Thomas and Shaquilla Bradley, 2 8-year-olds, were killed when he opened fire in a 3rd-grade classroom after reloading his gun in a lavatory. During the brawl, 7 other students and 2 teachers were hurt. Wilson appeared to target kids who shouted in terror, according to witnesses. Mitchell Carlton Sims, 34 years on death row. Sims became enraged with the national chain of Domino's pizza shops in a strange and persistent way. The hatred might have sprung from his own job with the chain, which he had left in the autumn of 1985. On December 3, 1985, Sims broke into the Domino's restaurant in Hanahan, South Carolina, where he had just finished employment. He tortured both of the employees before shooting them both to death. One victim was instantly murdered, while the other, who had been shot 4 times, made it to a police station and identified Sims as the shooter before passing out. When his second victim passed away a week later, Sims and his girlfriend, Ruby Paget, were already in Glendale, California, plotting their next crime. Sims had a Domino's pizza delivered to his motel room on December 10th. Deliveryman John Harrington arrived. He was undressed, choked with a washcloth, and drowned in the tub. Sims went to the restaurant, and he put on the dead man's uniform, stole from its safe, and left 2 employees chained in the freezer, unable to move and having to stand on tiptoe to keep them from hanging themselves. By December 11, Sims and Paget were holed up in Las Vegas when he checked into a budget motel under the name of Jeff Richardson. After Harrington's stolen truck was found in a casino parking lot on December 21st, both suspects were taken into custody on Christmas morning as a result of widespread media coverage. Maurice Hughes, 28 years on death row. The state of South Carolina sentenced him to death for the murder of a police officer. Hughes shot and killed York County Sheriff's Deputy Brent McCants during a traffic stop, according to court filings. In the restaurant parking lot in Charlotte, North Carolina, on September 25, 1992, 2 college students were approached by Hughes and Eric Forney, who were carrying a gun, and their vehicle was taken. Officer McCants stopped the 2 guys for driving without headlights when they got to Rock Hill. He was shot multiple times and had his police-issue walkie-talkie removed from his belt. Johnny Olandis Bennett, 28 years on death row. He received a death sentence for kidnapping and murder. Court records state that Johnny Olandis Bennett abducted Benton Smith, killed him after forcing him to hand over his unemployment check. On Tuesday, November 27, 1990, 24-year-old Benton Smith disappeared. He and Bennett were last spotted leaving his home in Gaston, South Carolina, Happytown neighborhood. Traveling to cash victim's $147 unemployment check, the 2 departed in the victim's car. At 11:56 a.m., the victim cashed his check, and this was the last time he was seen alive. Later that day, Bennett was spotted driving the victim's car and giving several items to friends. The victim's vehicle was later discovered outside Bennett's mother's workplace, which was a school. Bennett led authorities to the victim's body close to his sister's house after making a series of contradictory claims to them and ultimately admitting to the murder. 70 to 75 stab wounds, mostly to the victim's head, neck, and upper back, were discovered during an autopsy. The wounds were caused by a Phillips head screwdriver. Internal bleeding or asphyxiation as a result of the stab wounds was the cause of death. Donnie Council, 27 years on death row. Elizabeth Gatty, 72 years old, was slain by Donnie Council after she was essayed, beaten, and robbed in her Bath home. 4 years later, he was found guilty and given the death penalty. She had been duct taped from her forehead to her neck when she was discovered, lying up beneath a sheet or spread. After Council fed Gatty a mixture of household cleansers, she spent hours strapped to the floor of her basement. In less than 2 hours, a jury determined that Donnie Council ought to be put to death. Bobby Wayne Stone, 26 years on death row. On February 26, 1996, Stone bought a .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun and also a shotgun. He shot the firearms and drank beer while wandering through the woods for the rest of the day. Stone ended up in Ruth Griffith's property later that day. He said that Griffith and he were old drinking buddies in his police testimony. Griffith denied that, saying that the only reason she knew Stone was because he had dated her niece in the past and had visited her home to pick her up. When Stone arrived at the residence, Mary Ruth McLeod, Griffith's adult daughter, who lived with Griffith, was there. Stone was in the yard with his weapons and a beer can when McLeod asked him to leave. The man obeyed, but McLeod was already on the phone with 911. At 6:06 p.m., Sergeant Charles Kubala arrived at Griffith's residence. As Stone has already made his way back to the woods, Sergeant Kubala examined the area, had a conversation with McLeod and Griffith, and then departed. Shortly after, Griffith heard gunfire in her backyard, followed by a knock on her side porch's inner door. Griffith called her neighbor, Landro Taylor, after McLeod had left the house, and Taylor came over and dialed 911 from inside Griffith's house. Sergeant Kubala answered the call again, showing up at 7:07 p.m. Stone remained on the side porch, his weapon in his hand, and pounding on the door. While Sergeant Kubala proceeded around the house toward the side porch, Taylor and Griffith stayed inside. Taylor and Griffith heard someone cry "halt" or "hold it" from inside, and then 3 or 4 gunshots were heard right away. Sergeant Kubala was hit by Stone twice, once in the neck and once in the ear. He passed away at the site. Following several hours of searching, Stone was discovered by Sumter County Sheriff's officer in the woods, lying still between 2 logs with the murder weapon under his body. Stone admitted to the shooting in a statement he made early the next morning. However, he said the gun just went off and then he ran away. He insisted it was an accident. Norman Starnes, 26 years on death row. Norman killed 2 men. The sheriff's department was notified that these 2 men were missing. A local television station produced a piece about them. Norman Starnes was one of the individuals they had interviews with. He implored anyone with knowledge on their disappearance to get in touch with the sheriff's department. Norman knew where they were at all times during that interview. When he threatened to kill his girlfriend, his luck ran out, and that's when she contacted the police. The couple had been at a nearby watering hole shooting pool the night the 2 men went missing. After arriving at Norman's house, the 2 men were shot by him. Norman then proceeded to get a friend to assist him in transporting the dead to an uncle's home in the adjacent county. A few days after he buried the men, his uncle called him to tell him that the smell was becoming too strong and that he needed to relocate the remains. Norman did just that, but the girlfriend told the police everything, so he was apprehended. Gary Terry, 26 years on death row. On May 24, 1994, Uri Jackson, then 47 years old, was discovered dead from physical assault at her Lexington County residence. The telephone wires had been removed from the phone box, and the window on her home's carport door had been broken out. The victim's body was discovered in the living room, mostly naked, and she had also been assayed. She suffered many head injuries from blunt trauma in addition to multiple injuries from defensive wounds. Blunt trauma with a skull fracture and brain damage was the cause of death. Terry was found guilty and sentenced to death for the murder. Bayan Alexei, 25 years on death row. The state of South Carolina sentenced him to death for the murder of a police officer. A white Ford Mustang with a Delaware license plate was pulled over on New Year's Eve 1997 by South Carolina Highway Patrol Sergeant Franklin Lingard for speeding on Interstate 95. As Sergeant Lingard got close to the Mustang's driver's side, A gunshot fired from within the vehicle killed him. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.